Hey everyone, this is the Interim Expert Team with Tame the Change. We're here today with Kana and Polo. Our guest is Marc Nathan, who is the VP of Client Strategy at Egan Nelson, where he expertly assists companies with fundraising, targeting angel investors and venture capital. Marc, I will turn it over to you to give a quick synopsis of yourself and all that you do.
Thank you, Parker. I appreciate it. So yes, my day job is working for a very astute, specifically focused startup law firm called Egan Nelson, based here in Austin, but offices all over the country. But my real job, that's my profession, but my real job is helping startups grow their businesses. And I've been doing that for quite a long time, and I just happened to find a home at Egan Nelson. But my main focus is really helping early stage companies find fundraising matches. So I make a lot of time around introducing early stage companies, whether they're tech-based companies or consumer packaged goods companies, to investors.
Fantastic. So Marc, I know you because you're everywhere in Austin. You can't go across a single group or a single person, especially in the CPG world, that does not know Marc Nathan. So during the pandemic, what are some changes that you've seen in terms of how, just the CPG market?
Okay, it's a great question. So the biggest and most important change for everybody, and I don't think this is telling any secrets to anyone, is that sitting at home in front of Zoom calls all day is not entirely bad. It's not the same. I'm a networking guy. I like to go to events. I like to host events. I like to meet people in person. There was a time, and not too long ago, 2 years ago, 2019, where I would have 5, 6, 7 coffee meetings in a row in a day. And that was nothing to me. That was just the way the business was. Those have all completely gone away. We're starting to come back just a little bit 1 year into the pandemic. But as far as I'm concerned, being on Zooms and meeting people and actually having these face-to-face conversations, even though they're digital, is not entirely bad.
Do you feel that there's a new set of expectations in terms of cultivating the relationships that you see involved in investment and lending out your advice?
Well, let me address the second part first. I don't give advice because nobody listens to it. I only have opinions. And sometimes those are good opinions, sometimes those are bad, but advice, nobody takes advice, so I don't give advice anymore. But to answer your first part, the real issue is this. Yes, expectations are different. One thing that I find just so funny is that because we're all collectively on back-to-back Zoom calls all day long, the time, whether it's 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, the time to start something is actually very crisp. Whereas in a get together, in a meeting, in a face-to-face, in a coffee, you have to park, you have to get into the shop, you have to stand in line. There's usually, 5 or 10 minutes or so of a break between meetings, just so you can collect your thoughts and get ready for the next one. And those days are gone. When you're back-to-back Zoom, it's 11:59 to noon, 1:59 to 2. There's no break, even just for a mental stretch or just to kind of think about different things. So that's one change that I find to be very interesting. I'm surprised that more people aren't booking times at like 1:05 or 5 minutes before. They're just not, because it's not what we do. We're planning and thinking about our times in 1 hour blocks. So that's number one. Number two, and one thing that's been great for me personally, is cultivating relationships has actually been quite easy. There's been a number of tools that have come on the market, things like Lunch Club, AI, and a few others that are designed to match different people from different backgrounds. And that doesn't exactly replace in-person networking, but it certainly allows people to bump into each other when they wouldn't do so normally. And for me personally, it's been fantastic because I'm meeting people not just here where I live in Austin, but all over the country. I've got calls today with Chicago, with Phoenix, and with Philadelphia, and couldn't do those meetings no matter what in a single day, anytime before COVID.
So what do you think is happening moving forward? So normalizing Zoom helps us expand our reach, but there is a sensibility that often you can develop in person. What do you think is happening moving forward, and what's your preference?
My preference is always going to be in person. You know so much when you see them, when you look into their eyes, when you see the facial expressions. 80% of all communication is nonverbal. Yeah. So we do miss that. Right now, I'm just imagining here, and I don't want to really imagine it too hard because we don't know each other that well, but how many people are in this call are wearing pants, real pants? No hands raised. See?
Oh,
Are you talking about like legging pants? Because I'm doing that.
Like pants you would wear to a professional meeting.
right.
Yeah.
I'll be the first to admit, I'm not going to make a secret. I'm wearing gym shorts. I'm not going to show you, but it's
Yeah.
party on top, business on top, party on the bottom. The comfort level. Yeah. The comfort level of being on Zoom and having kids scream and yell and have dogs barking and have the mailman come and ring your doorbell and have the lawn guy out in the lawn with the bug. We don't care anymore. It doesn't matter. So I think from that point of view, we're normalized. We're not as stiff and as formal as I think we were even a year ago. And I think that's a good thing. Truth be told, we have been going towards this, especially here in Austin. We're a very casual town, but it's not unheard of to be very casual for a very professional, very important business meeting nowadays, because that's how people are. It just doesn't matter anymore.
Yeah.
I think it's how Steve Jobs always wore the black turtleneck and Zuckerberg always wore the hoodie with the tennis shoes. I feel like this is kind of like the great equalizer across men and women and tech and non-tech, where we can wear whatever we want and focus on what we're really doing. Which is really
completely agree.
So, I mean, that's a beautiful thing about the whole Zoom culture. What are some things that you've seen people run into that are maybe not so much of a benefit at the beginning? Like what were some things or resources or additional team members you thought people seemed to need in the CPG space when they first started? Because it's so physical, right? And so much in store. Was there more need for a digital?
Absolutely. So essentially in the consumer packaged goods space, everything lives and dies by how something tastes or feels. And if you're not in store and you can't taste a product, how do you try it? How do you test something new? How do you see something on the store shelves? At the beginning of the pandemic, when people were actually going to grocery stores, even if they just didn't get Instacart sent to their home, or here in Austin, Favor gets sent to your home, we would see things, we would discover things on store shelves, and packaging was critically important, and where they were placed on the shelf and what they were next to and all the different kinds of things. We don't have that. If somebody is doing essentially a speed run into a grocery store to get the staples, they're not concerned about something new or interesting. So I think there's been a very interesting number of companies. I'm actually talking to one on Friday that I really like, but they send you products in the mail as samplers. And there's been a number of these companies that I've seen, and some of them are doing quite well. So almost the subscription box model, but for things you've never tried before. And so I see a lot of CPG companies going to that. Now with some of the tastings coming back and COVID protocols in place, we're going to start seeing more in-store tasting. And this is especially true for obviously food and beverage and alcohol. But it's going to take a while for people to feel a lot more comfortable tasting things from strangers.
Are you seeing any trends in a movement towards sustainability, specifically in the CPG space, that you feel like were throttled in the last year as opposed to pre-pandemic?
Certainly. So sustainability has always been this underlying theme with a lot of the newer brands coming out, and that's obvious, and that's true for just about everybody. What we're seeing now is that the packaging itself is becoming a lot more sustainable, and frankly, it doesn't have to be as glossy or as fancy as it used to be because it's being mailed instead of sitting on a shelf. So we're seeing the ability for these brands to really focus on the sustainable aspects instead of the visual aspects. So we're looking at recyclable paper pouches. We're looking at less plastic, a lot less what we call the hero packaging. Think about next time you go to a Target, you're walking down the toy aisle, the Barbie. Barbie's a piece of plastic, wrapped in a piece of plastic, zip tied with a piece of plastic, covered in a bag. We don't need all that. Amazon years ago had this whole concept called, and I don't remember the name, and I'm sure somebody will find it, but it's essentially shipping those types of hero boxes in regular, everyday, recyclable cardboard boxes because you simply don't need it. You just want the item, not the box.
Yeah.
And so I think we're seeing a lot of that. There's a number of people here in Austin that are really focused on sustainability, and I think it's really important. And we're seeing even things like eco-based ink, and once again, the Tetra Paks, which are sort of the hardest things in the world to recycle. And Tetra Paks are sort of the plastic covered, think of a milk bottle or milk carton. Plastic covered paper, we can't recycle those. So I think people are really starting to revisit some. Now, certain products, you need it. You have to have it. It's something that is it's the best use case for that particular product. But we are starting to see a lot more people realize that the packaging itself is not what people are buying, and they don't need the so-called bling to jump off store shelves.
Yeah,
absolutely. That makes perfect sense. It's funny you mentioned the milk cartons, because until recently, my husband every week was digging out the milk cartons from our recycling because I was throwing them in there. I thought just automatically that they were recyclable.
Sure.
There's so many things like that. It's interesting because I feel like there's been a big emphasis on greenwashing since the pandemic happened, because people are at home, and I don't mean this in a bad way. We're all spiraling a little bit in the evening because we have so much pent up energy. So people will start researching all of the products a little bit more. Whereas before, you could get away with saying that you were a green company and really just have, like what is it? Like a cardboard looking packaging, right? But really it wasn't built in a sustainable area. It just didn't fit the mold. So have you seen people be a lot more careful about not only like pursuing sustainability, but actually like following through with like who their suppliers are and everything like that?
I think some companies have tried. There's a company here in town who I absolutely adore. It's called the Stroop Club, and Chantel Piat has a company. They make Stroop waffles, the cookies. And she has been an absolute champion about being as 100% sustainable as possible. Everything from her plastic is biodegradable. Her manufacturing and her supply chain is really focused on sustainability. It's something that is a core value to her business. So I look at somebody like that as leading the charge of actually creating not just a sustainable package, but a sustainable business.
Absolutely. And Chantel's great. Thank you for introducing us, by the way. She's wonderful.
Oh, I adore her. I really do.
What are the implications for a CPG company? So after COVID, once we come back to a new normal and we now have in-store sampling, do they have to decide? What are the implications for you as an infrastructure, as a company, to then sustain both delivery methods, to have in-store sampling, but also keep it going online?
Well, I think that the obvious answer here is that we're going to go hybrid. There will never be another day where direct to consumer or direct sales or in-store sales are going to be spoken of in the same sentence as separate entities. It's all sales at this point. So in-store tasting is just one more channel for marketing. Just like Instagram is a channel for marketing, or anything that you do online, whether it's through Amazon or through just the regular web, we need to be able to display our products and make people aware of them. That's marketing 101. So that will never go away at this point. I think that a lot of companies that started out as traditional businesses very quickly moved to e-commerce, and now we're seeing a ton of e-commerce or digital native brands starting to think about what it's going to look like after the pandemic, where they can do those in-store tastings. But right now, it's very clear to me that the money spent on the traditional Facebook or Instagram ads is the only money you could spend for a while. That's never going to change, but I think some of that marketing dollar is going to go to in-store experiences.
Yeah,
that makes perfect sense. Well, it's interesting because I feel like before the pandemic, a lot of CPG brands weren't focusing all that much on their digital marketing strategies, and they were performing at okay levels.
Right.
And because you aren't able to like measure your metrics, and you're not able to see like what the demand is. And so with physical products, I admire anybody who goes into physical, because that is a huge spend and a huge risk. But now I feel like there is there's a bit less risk involved, because you can try things out with ads or with e-commerce and kind of figure out how much people really are interested in your product and what people are interested in, what draws them. How do you feel about that?
Well, the old saying, and this is, when I say old, I mean like 1880 saying, they say that half of advertising works, we just don't know which half. So advertising has always been a hit or miss opportunity, but when it works, it really works. A perfect example of this, I think we all know that billboards have a horrible ROI. They're hovering around 1/4 to 0.5% ROI. However, I was driving a couple days ago and I saw a billboard for something, and I saw it and I couldn't believe it. It was for an event, an actual in-person event coming up here in May. So when I finally parked where I was going, I remember the website, I dialed it in, I saw they had a phone number, and I called the guy. And I said, hey, tell me about this. And it turns out they put that billboard up about 2 hours before I saw it. And so one of the things I said was, listen, I know that billboards, once again, have horrible ROI, but in this case, at least for this individual, it worked. Everybody is going to be doing different things and they're going to be trying different things. But as we said earlier, it's so much easier to switch or change or tweak your budgets on digital instead of doing anything in the physical realm. It's just that's just the way things are. It's just easier because moving pixels is a hell of a lot easier than moving bits.
Yeah.
So with that, you would suggest possibly that your recommendation, your advice for a startup is to start online and then build your way up, to build that integrated presence.
Well, Paul, you fell into a trap because you said advice. No, I don't give advice. I give opinions. But I was waiting for you to do that. So you stepped on a landmine there. But the answer is yes, absolutely. Especially for CPG. I've only been in the CPG space for a few years now, but something I've learned that it's really, really easy to crawl, walk, run. If you've got a product that you think is important, that you think people will like, you try it out in your kitchen or your bathtub or wherever you are making it in your garage, and you let your friends and family try it. Then if they say, yeah, I like this, I think this tastes good, and we can work on this, the next step is farmers markets. For once again, a new audience of people who are very likely to look at, try, and buy your product, even if they don't know it. And then the next step is traditional retail, mostly grocery stores, or like I said, other retail, big box retail. So we have that component in CPG and have for a long time. But I absolutely agree that e-commerce should be first and foremost on everybody's list. When you first start a brand, you have to understand what the brand is. You have to understand who your persona is, how you get to them, how you target them, and what they really are getting with your product. It's not just the physical item that you're buying. It's the lifestyle that you're trying to impart.
Right.
And the way to do that right now is certainly digital.
That's it. Go ahead.
And yet you have to build in that pricing structure, right? Because when eventually you go in brick and mortar, you have to account for those extra additional steps.
Absolutely. In general, and this is not true of everything, but in general, whenever you see an item on the store shelves, anywhere you go, it's usually about 50% marked up from what you're actually selling it as a manufacturer. If I'm doing an energy bar or a drink or a food product, the store typically buys it for 50% of what they're selling it for. So your 50% is what the company is getting paid, which means that your margin has to be a lot lower than that for you to actually make a profit.
Yeah.
So in general, this is not always true, but production costs, logistics costs, all the extras, everything from insurance to manufacturing to shipping to everything, should run roughly 40% of your actual cost. So you can actually build in a profit.
Yeah.
Or excuse me, not cost, price.
Right, correct.
I love that. It's so interesting to me. I feel like people don't consider when buying a product how much you actually have to kind of set aside for that and why you have to mark it up. But I love that you brought that up so that kind of anyone who's not in the CPG market understands why each product is more expensive.
Sure. And there's always things like people just don't even think about: insurance, shipping costs. In the grocery world, there's a huge amount of marketing costs that you basically have to give trade spend, either product or costs, to the grocer or to the retail box that allows them to advertise and promote the product itself. So all that has to get baked in, maybe not at the unit level, but certainly at the company level. And therefore, pricing is also positioning. So if you're going to come out with let's say a face cream, and that face cream was on the market and you knew what it cost you, but you were either a few dollars more or a few dollars less than the best-selling big box brand, the position that you are on the shelf is going to be really redundant based on the price. You have to figure out what your pricing structure is, because that positions you with value as well. There's lots and lots of different things you have to bake into the idea of actually getting something into somebody's hands.
Absolutely. I remember there was an interesting, what was it? I think it was a masterclass I watched with Sarah Blakeney, the founder of Spanx, where she talks about how when she originally started out selling, I think it was copy machines.
That's right.
And every time when she was going out and trying to sell the copy machines, she was selling them at a lower price than the Kinko's copy machine. And I could be wrong with a lot of facts, but I know the general gist of the story.
All right. We get the direction.
Exactly. But she tried to go lower and people would think that it was a lesser product than Kinko's. And so she tried to match. And
That's
she was
right.
like, well, they said, well, why would I buy the Kinko's? Why wouldn't I just buy Kinko's? Because it's a well-known brand. But when she priced it more, people assumed there was a higher value. And I think that kind of applies to a lot of CPG products, especially.
That's 100% correct. And it's also true in the freelance world or in the agency world.
Sure.
And I say to anybody that's starting a freelance service or a consulting service, you know what you would want to pay, but if you double your price, you double your customers.
Sure.
And it's a very counterintuitive way of thinking about things. It doesn't make any sense. Everybody's at a race to the bottom as far as dollars go, but most people believe price is somewhat correlated to quality. So if you raise your prices, you automatically impart a sense of higher quality than what your competitors are doing.
Sure.
And while that doesn't make a lot of sense to most people as a buyer, it certainly makes a lot of sense as a seller.
Definitely. Well, and it also, you want to make sure your value actually meets that price though. Because I feel like a lot in the freelance world or the agency world, a lot of people, when they start out, will underprice and come out at like, well, I can do that for $20. It's like, that's crazy. You're obviously not charging enough for how much time it takes to actually do it because you're not factoring in all of the different components, just like with CPG.
Well, and not to get outside of the CPG role, but really in the agency or freelance world, the actual work you do, like actual client work, is typically 20% of the day-to-day operations of your business. Sure. So really focusing and actually billing that hour, doing that project is roughly 1 day out of a 5-day week, if you think about it from that perspective. And it's hard to really imagine. There's all kinds of admin and partnerships and business development, and all the stuff you just have to do to run a business allows you to take away. Now, the people that are either moonlighting or working a day job and trying to dabble in a business, they can definitely do a website for $500. That's great. And sometimes they're decent and sometimes they're not, and usually you get what you pay for. But if somebody's just starting out and they want to underprice, that's perfectly fine. But when they get into it full time and they realize there's actual real cost to running a business, that $500 website becomes a $5,000 website very quickly. And right after that, it becomes a $15,000 website because that's what it should cost.
Exactly. And you have to pay for people to do all the different components.
Mm-hmm.
Which goes back to the importance of having a clear promotional strategy that includes sampling, right? Because the higher the entry barrier, the more the sampling is going to become important for you to start, getting closer to tastemakers and getting word of mouth and so on.
Absolutely. And talking about tastemakers, I think there's an important component we're missing that we haven't touched on yet, but it's important. So if we talked about paid advertising, we haven't really talked about organic advertising, which is really influencer advertising. Mm-hmm. So brands that really want to get out there, everybody in the modern world in 2021 knows that there is a component of influencers for certain types of brands that really matter. It's very difficult to manage that. It's very difficult to track the ROI on that. Everybody kind of knows you have to do it, but does it work? Is this the right person? Am I paying enough? Am I paying too much? How do I track the sales? But those kinds of things all feed into that whole idea of building up a viral loop of word of mouth. And it's not easy, but I think a lot of agencies are really focused on that now.
Definitely. And I feel like we always talk about it as brand equity, right? It's whether it's your partnerships by partnering with bigger brands that people trust or with influencers that people trust. It's all about making sure that your friends reflect who you are, right?
Precisely.
You want to make sure the influencers are the right person. You want to make sure your partnerships are the right people that all have the same values and mission that your company has, or very well aligned ones. Because that's where you can really measure, right? It's people associate you and people find you because they trust that brand already.
That's correct. And I think the right word, you said it exactly right, is aligned.
Yep.
How do you have brand alignment, value alignment, and business alignment? Those are very difficult things to do, especially with a brand new company, and typically a early or less experienced influencer.
Right, a micro influencer.
A micro influencer, nano influencer, you name them all, but they all boil down to the same thing. I have a following. My following buys your stuff if I talk about how great you are.
Yep.
Yeah.
That really is the entire influencer market in a nutshell.
Yep. Exactly.
Mark, if you had to give one final, I won't say piece of advice, but I'll say one
Opinion.
final opinion to entrepreneurs or individuals in the industry on how to tame the change and keep moving forward, what would it be?
Parker, that's actually really easy for me. I haven't had this holstered. This is how I think. Just show up. Showing up is the most important thing. When I say show up, especially now in the digital age, it's register for that webinar and make sure people see that you're interested. Go to that event when it's safe, that you actually were thinking about going to, but didn't have the time and all that. Showing up really is the key to most businesses, especially most business relationships. And it's a hard thing. Most people are head down doing the work. They've got stuff coming in all the time. They've got inbox full. They've got work that has to get done. But a lot of people really put business networking and business development and pipeline development on the back burner while they're doing their work. And I'm a testament to this. I don't really do a whole lot except show up. But once you show up, you get to meet people, you get to learn what their likes and dislikes are, you get to understand their business, you understand what their customer profiles are, like what they're looking for. And by showing up, you get to have those conversations you really normally wouldn't do online. And frankly, showing up online, like we were saying earlier, is that much easier. I could be on 5 webinars today in 5 different cities and nobody would blink an eye about it. And nobody would wonder, well, why is this guy from Austin in Minnesota doing a webinar? Well, because the information's important. And more importantly, the crowd is important. I want people to know that I am there. That's a lot of reason why Clubhouse is getting such a hot ticket item right now. Everybody's talking about and thinking about it. There's probably going to be a dozen new Clubhouse clones in the next 6 months. Some are going to work, some are going to fail. I heard today that LinkedIn is thinking about doing a Clubhouse clone. Twitter's doing one. All of them are going to be out there. It's just one more channel for us to worry about. But at the end of the day, what it really boils down to answer your question, Parker, is show up in the same tribe, or at least be a part of the tribe you want to be a part of.
Love that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
The last question, which is, you're such an insider, Mark, and you have an opinion. What is the next brand that you think is going to make a splash that you would tell us to watch out for?
It's like asking which kid is my favorite. I have one, but I'm not going to tell you.
Okay.
That's a great question. I don't know if it's a particular brand. I think there's trends. I'll tell you what, I'll go out on a limb. I have one. There's a local brand here in Austin, and I am not a Jell-O shot person. I don't drink. I don't do Jell-O shots if I did, but there's a company here in town now called Boozy Bites. It used to be called Ethel Ambrosia. The founder is a woman by the name of Dee Dee Bryant, who I think is brilliant. She was a food scientist for a while at Nestle, and she came up with this idea for a vegan, healthy, better for you Jell-O shot made out of seaweed. I think that's probably the most innovative things I've seen in a long time. I've seen a lot of other great ideas and great concepts. I talked to a hemp-based feminine hygiene product yesterday, who I think is very, very clever. But this particular one, I just think there's something about the moment I met her at one of my CPG events and the moment she showed it to me, I said, this is a winner. And once again, I'm not the target market because I'm not in the sorority and I'm not going to a lot of bachelorette parties, but I totally get the market. There's another brand that's very similar to that. Once again, I am clearly outside of the target market, but it's called Lamique Beauty, and it's organic makeup for women of color. I'm about as opposite of that as you can imagine from a target perspective, but the company's a winner. Kim Roxy as a CEO is just phenomenal. I get it. It's a great market. And remember, great markets make great companies. And so anybody that can get into a market like that, another perfect ideal scenario for something like that is another friend of mine here in Austin. Michelle Hope has a company called Prep U. It is a hygiene suite of products for boys aged 11 to 14. If anybody's ever been around boys 11, 14, they stink, but they don't know it. And you can't buy them Axe body spray because they don't want to smell like a fraternity kid. they can't use their mom stuff because their mom's typically buying this stuff. They're not going to use secret deodorant. It's just not going to happen. So Prep You is an entire product line specifically for these tween boys. So they have something that's theirs. It doesn't smell like a gym locker, and it makes a lot of sense. So it's just a market that's been completely untapped, and I think it's brilliant.
Very cool.
Excellent.
One more. Okay. We keep saying one more question.
Third last question.
My last question.
Oh,
but,
there you go.
I mean, it's so interesting because I feel like you've touched on a lot of different things that lead up to this, but where do you see what do you see the trends being? Because I feel like the big thing about CPG we've talked about here is there's exposure for brands who didn't have it before. Like there's been a bunch of lists that are for Black-owned brands or women-owned brands or brands targeting, well, I mean, I haven't seen one targeting young boys, but let's just say there's a lot of niche markets that have come out of it.
There's tons of niche markets, 100%.
Yeah. What do you think are the big trends that are going to be leading CPG after this because they finally get attention?
Function. So taste is always going to be the determination of whether you're going to buy a product again or not. Taste is always number one. When I say taste, obviously for other types of businesses, it's how something looks or how something feels if you're talking about shoes or apparel or jewelry. But specifically in food bev, it's all about the taste. How does it actually taste? I hate to say this, I want to leave on a high note, but this is a negative. I received in one of those sample boxes, I received a keto, sugar-free, beautifully packaged cookie dough mix. I mixed it up. I did it myself. I followed all the instructions. I made sure it was right. The taste was terrible. It tasted like eating wet carpet on concrete, and it was awful. And I felt really bad because the people were super nice and I like them and they're great. I did that with an ice cream company, a local ice cream company in Austin. I'm not going to tell you which one. I met them. I thought they were awesome. I liked their brand. I liked their story. I liked them personally. I went to Whole Foods and bought a carton of it and tasted it, gave it to my kids, and we spit it out. And if you know me, I don't spit out ice cream. I have a crippling Bluebell addiction. But other than that, I like something that tastes good. So taste is one thing, but to answer your question very specifically, functionality. What can this do for me? So it tastes good, fine, that's table stakes. But does this make me smarter? Does it make me faster? Does it make me better? What is the function of it? Is it made out of superfoods that's going to make me or help me lose weight? Is it going to make me feel better in some other organic way? So I think functionality and food as medicine, which is the nth degree of that, really is going to be something that a lot of people are going to ask for or demand when it comes to the products they buy on a regular basis.
Love that. Completely agree. We had a very similar conversation with Dan of Notamu recently, and just kind
Perfect example.
Yeah, because your food affects your psychology as well. There's been so much science behind it that I think, especially with the world in the state of needing some mental wellness and needing physical wellness as well,
certainly,
food has to be in that direction going forward.
Absolutely. And Notamu is a perfect example of something that is better for you using an alternative milk, in this case, coconut, and it tastes really good.
Yeah. And
they went product first, then retail. Yeah. And I think the world of that brand, I think they're doing great. And I like hearing that they're doing well.
Likewise.
Thank you so much, Marc. This has been super, super enriching, and I'm sure our listeners and viewers will get a lot out of this. So thank you again.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you, Marc. And for everybody out there, please subscribe to our channel and follow and listen to more great conversations like this one today here with Marc.
And follow
Marc. I appreciate you having me. Thank you.
Yeah, follow Marc too. And Marc, is there anywhere else that you would like people to kind of have a call to action? Do you want people to join the CPG groups and Facebook?
I'm very greedy. I want it all.
Okay.
Easiest way to do it, the best way, and the single ask is probably subscribe to the newsletter that I publish once a week called the Texas Squared Startup Newsletter. It's texassquared.com. Pretty simple. That typically covers all the startup news, a lot of events. Every once in a while, I'll throw an opinion in there, but ultimately, that's sort of the home base for everything else. I do a monthly CPG newsletter, monthly CPG meetup here in town, which is now all virtual. So I have a lot of friends from other cities and other states that join us. So once again, just show up. And the best way for me is Texas Squared, but I really appreciate it.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Marc.
Excellent. Thank you all.
Thank you, guys.